G'day, legends. Today, we're venturing into a place of breathtaking beauty yet chilling mystery. A place where crystal-clear waters cascade over ancient boulders, inviting you to cool off from the Queensland heat. But don't be fooled by its serene facade, mate. This is Devil's Pool, or Babinda Boulders, as the locals call it, and beneath its shimmering surface lies a dark secret, a tragic legend, and a history stained with unexplained deaths. They say a vengeful spirit haunts these waters, luring men to their doom. Is it just an old wives' tale, or is there something truly sinister at play? Prepare yourselves, because once you hear the story of Oolana, you might think twice before taking a dip in these seemingly innocent waters. Out in far north Queensland, where the rainforest thickens and the air's got that humid weight pressing on your skin, there's a place whispered about more than it's spoken of outright. Babinda Boulders, they call it. Picture this, ancient granite smooth as river stones, worn down by 1,000 years of water's patience, cradling pools so clear you'd swear they were safe. But don't let the surface fool you, mate, 'cause just beneath there's a pull, a darkness, a breath that doesn't belong to this world anymore. Now, the locals call the deepest pocket of that water Devil's Pool. Doesn't take much imagination to guess why. It's not just the drownings, though there've been more than enough. It's the feel of the place, like the land's been watching, like it remembers. Step too close and the air tightens round your chest. Even the birds go quiet some days. They say the pool's cursed, haunted by a spirit named Oolana. And I've heard the tale passed down by the Yidinji people, passed down through the smoke of countless fires. It's a story of love, betrayal and sorrow so deep it clings to the rocks like mist. Whether you believe in spirits or not, you'd best listen, 'cause stories like this don't survive for generations unless there's truth buried in the bones of them. It begins with beauty, like many traps do. The water glimmers under sunbeams that sneak through the canopy, and backpackers come in droves, chasing that picture-perfect splash in a tropical dream. But every so often, one doesn't come back. And always, it's a young bloke. Strong swimmers full of bravado, lured in despite the signs and the warnings. Some reckon it's just poor judgment, a misstep. Others reckon there's something else in those waters, something that watches, waits, and chooses. It ain't just the tourists that feel it. Ask any of the old-timers in Babinda. They'll tell you of the cold that runs down your spine when you walk too close, of the stones that shift underfoot like they're alive. Ask them in the right moment, and they'll speak Oolana's name with a shiver, not out of fear but out of respect, out of grief. See, the land up here remembers what was done to her, and in Devil's Pool, that memory's never faded, not once. It's a place stitched tight with sadness, and stitched tighter still with silence. If you head about an hour south of Cairns, following that winding bitumen that curls through sugarcane fields and patchy rainforest, you'll come upon the town of Babinda. Quiet place, barely a blink on the map. But it's got something the rest of the world doesn't, the Boulders. A spot of natural beauty so unreal, so pristine, it feels like the land itself is trying to lull you in. And maybe, just maybe, it is. Babinda Creek flows through the place, cutting through the rock like a blade. It doesn't roar, it whispers. The water slides smooth over granite, pooling in crystal basins that glow blue-green in the morning light. Families picnic upstream, kids splash where it's shallow. But downstream, the creek changes, becomes something else. That's where Devil's Pool lies, not marked by signs or fences, but by a shift in the air. You'll know you've reached it when the laughter fades and the shadows get longer, even in daylight. The water there moves different, sometimes calm, glassy. Other times it churns like it's hungry. Locals call the worst of it the washing machine. Reckon it's taken more than its share of lives. Since 1959, they've counted 21 dead. Almost all young men, good swimmers, strong, but none strong enough for that place. Some reckon it's just risk. Others, they look to the Yidinji. See, the Yidinji people were here long before the maps and the fences, before the tracks and the names. They say Devil's Pool is sacred, not in the churchy way, in the old way, where spirit and earth are one, where stories are truths carved into stone and soul, and they say a tragedy happened here long, long ago. A woman named Oolana. You'll hear her name again and again, whispered like wind through leaves. She was young, beautiful, and married to a man from her own tribe. Diga, his name was. But as fate would have it, another came, a stranger, a warrior from afar. His name was Warunu, and that's where this tale begins to twist. There's an ache that sits at the heart of this land, not loud, not wailing, but quiet like rain on dry leaves. It's the ache of a story half whispered and never forgotten. The story of Oolana. Long before settlers claimed the soil and before asphalt split the trees, the rainforest was home to the Yidinji people. They lived by the rhythm of the land, river, stone, sky. Oolana was one of them, a woman not only of beauty, but of spirit. Her presence, they said, carried the warmth of campfire and the weight of dreaming. She was married young to Diga, a man respected, though older, and solid as the boulders they lived beside. He was a provider, a man of the old ways, but his heart, while dutiful, did not burn. And then came Warunu. He wasn't from there, a visiting warrior from a neighboring tribe. He arrived with his kin on peaceful terms to trade and gather and share in ceremony. But Oolana, when she saw him, her world shifted, not like a storm or a flash flood, more like a tide turning, slow and certain. Warunu was younger than Diga, and he carried laughter in his voice, gentleness in his hands. When their eyes met under the canopy, something ancient stirred. Not lust, not mischief, something older, a knowing. They met in secret at first. Beneath the thickest ferns, behind the cascading veils of hidden waterfalls, the rainforest can be a keeper of secrets when it wants to be. Their love was fierce, not born of rebellion, but of recognition, as though they'd known each other in other lifetimes. But it was forbidden. Tribal law was clear. Oolana was married. To break that bond was to tear the fabric that bound the people together. But hearts rarely heed law, and the old spirits, they were watching. It didn't take long for whispers to bloom into suspicion. Eyes lingered too long. Footsteps were heard where none should be. Diga, proud and wounded, began to notice, and once the elders were told, there was no stopping the flood. Oolana and Warunu were summoned, their shame laid bare before the firelight of judgment, but shame didn't cling to Oolana. She stood tall, even as her heart trembled, and refused to deny what she felt. In the tribe's eyes, that made it worse. Love that defies tradition isn't seen as romantic, it's seen as dangerous, a rot in the roots. The elders declared that Warunu must leave at once. As for Oolana, she was to be watched, kept from bringing further disgrace. But lovers with fire in their veins rarely wait for permission. One night, under a moon dulled by clouds, they ran into the bush, into the thickness of the rainforest, past the trees that leaned in like listeners, past the rocks that bore witness. Diga and a group of men followed, rage burning their path. They knew where the lovers would go, to the water, the creek, the place that had always been theirs. The chase led through narrow paths and across slick stones. It rained that night, soft but steady, making every surface treacherous. The rainforest pulsed with tension, alive with the sound of footfalls, of shouted names, of hearts breaking in silence. And then, the boulders, the pool. Oolana and Warunu reached the edge, breathless, soaked, cornered. The water surged around the rocks, impatient. Diga's voice called out, not as a husband, but as a man wronged. The others flanked the lovers. No way forward, no way back. And in that moment, that blink of eternity, Oolana looked to Warunu. Her eyes didn't plead. They promised. She stepped forward out of his grasp, and with a cry that split the air like thunder, she threw herself into the swirling black. She vanished. Not a trace, no body, no sound after the splash, just the river churning, angrier now, as though it too grieved. Warunu lunged to follow, but arms pulled him back. They dragged him away, his voice broken and hollow, calling her name until his throat gave out. Diga didn't speak. He just watched the water, knowing he'd won nothing. The tribe returned, silent, drenched. A punishment had been dealt, but not by them. They say Warunu never returned to his people. Some reckon he wandered the rainforest for weeks, calling out to her, begging the land to give her back. Others say he stood at the pool's edge every day till his own reflection grew old and grey. But no one really knows. Warunu's name faded into the stones. Only Oolana remained. Her name, her story, her grief. They settled into the cracks of the boulders and the depths of the current. The Yidinji say her spirit lingered, that she cried out in the bubbling eddies, that she pulled at the ankles of those who dared disturb her waters, that her rage, now endless, turned love into vengeance. And that, mate, is how the curse began. Time doesn't move the same out here. It folds, lingers, echoes. The rainforest remembers. And while years turned to decades and decades to generations, the water of Devil's Pool never forgot the scream that night. Oolana's cry as she vanished beneath the surface, swallowed by sorrow, fury, and a current older than language. Her spirit, that's where the legend turns dark. It's said she became one with the creek, that her soul took root in the swirling hollows of the boulders, trapped by her own grief, sharpened by the betrayal of love torn away. And it wasn't long before the pool began to take. They came one by one, young fellas mostly, lads out for a swim, chasing thrill or testing strength, backpackers, locals, blokes showing off in front of their mates, strong swimmers, confident. But they'd enter those deeper channel and never surface again. Some say it's the current, some say it's the rocks, slick with algae, that offer no grip. But others, the ones who've stood there long enough, felt the air change, heard the soft keening of wind through trees. They say she chooses. Oolana, still waiting, still longing, still furious. Drawn to the same kind of soul that once held Warunu's fire. There's a stretch of the pool they call the washing machine. Doesn't sound like much, almost funny really, but it's deadly. The current there loops back on itself, swirling so tight and fast it can drag a person down before they know they're in trouble. Beneath the surface, there's a maze of underwater tunnels, snags, dark pockets that trap and hold. And in the silence, it's said, you can feel hands that don't belong pulling you further in. I once spoke to a ranger up that way, old bloke, sun-scarred and quiet, the kind who's seen more than he's said. He told me about a drowning back in the 80s. Young tourist, maybe 22, vanished mid-dive. They found his body days later, wedged deep in a crack under the boulders, his face twisted, arms reaching upward, as if he'd been dragged backwards. The current wasn't that strong, the ranger said. Not that day, but the look in that lad's eyes. Terror, not the panic of drowning, something deeper, like he'd seen something before the water took him. He swore never to go back in after that, and rangers don't scare easy. The Yidinji elders, they've always warned of this. For them, it isn't just folklore, it's law. You don't swim where Oolana weeps. You don't disturb her place of grief. They say the water speaks in dreams if you sleep too close. That Oolana's voice comes in your ear like a whisper if you get too near the edge at dusk. Not everyone hears it, but those who do never forget. And then there are the patterns. 21 deaths since 1959, every one of them male, most under 30, fit, adventurous. A certain type. The type that reminds her of Warunu, that's the line that keeps getting repeated. She only takes the ones that remind her. One woman who lost her brother there, she told me something that stuck. Said he wasn't reckless, said he was always careful. But that day, something changed. He stood too close to the water, looking down, quiet-like. Said he told her, "It looks like it wants me." Then he slipped, or jumped. No one knows for sure. But the way she tells it, his face was calm, as if answering a call. It's that kind of detail, those quiet things, that make the stories impossible to shake. Some tourists, even after hearing the tales, still climb down past the warning signs. There's a pull, a kind of beauty that begs for just one more step, one closer look. Maybe it's just the danger calling. Or maybe it's her. Maybe Oolana still waits in the depths, eyes open, arms outstretched, hoping each face that enters the water might be his, might be Warunu. And if it's not, then the water swallows. Now, here's where the tale cuts deeper, past legend, past grief, into that murky place where stories and deaths start to echo each other. A place where the line between curse and consequence isn't as clear as folk might like it to be. The thing about Oolana isn't just that she's remembered, it's that she's felt. Some places have a weight to them, not physical, not something you can measure with a scale or science, but a pressure in the chest, a tightening in the gut. Devil's Pool has that in spades. When people talk about the drownings, they always come back to the same thread, how sudden they are. 1 second, a bloke standing on a rock, grinning, waving, chest out to the sun. The next, he's gone. Slipped? Maybe. Dragged? Depends who you ask. But those who've been there, who've seen it with their own eyes, they'll tell you about the moment just before it happens. The stillness, the quiet, and the way the water seems to breathe. They say that's when she's closest. It's not always a violent thing either. Some describe it like seduction, like a trance. The water's so clear, so pure, it looks safe, inviting even, like a mirror too beautiful to ignore. One survivor, the only one I've ever met who made it back from the washing machine, said he felt called, not pulled, not pushed, just called. Said he stepped in without thinking. His mates reckoned he slipped, but he doesn't remember falling, only that he felt calm. And then nothing but spinning darkness and hands, not water, around his ankles. He was lucky. The current spat him back out. Most aren't. The Yidinji elders don't call it luck. They say Oolana let him go. Maybe saw something in his eyes that reminded her of someone else. Or maybe he wasn't the one she was waiting for. That's the thing with spirits. They're not cruel. They're just caught in loops of grief that never fade, never forgive. But the land tries to warn us. Always has. There are signs posted now. Big, bold red ones with danger in all caps. They line the edges of the safer pools, right where the water starts to narrow and deepen, but warnings fade in the face of beauty. And adrenaline, and the arrogance of believing bad things only happen to other people. It's no surprise the deaths continue. There was a time when the elders performed regular ceremonies at the pool, smoke rituals, songs, calling to Oolana to rest, to find peace, to let go. But as visitors grew, as fences went up and tourism brochures started flashing that turquoise water, the space for ritual shrank. Some say she grew angrier. Others say she simply grew louder, her sorrow amplified by every boot print on sacred ground. Even now, some nights, locals swear they hear weeping, not from people, from the trees, from the rocks, low and steady, like a woman humming a lullaby to herself. And in the lulls between the wind, if you're standing quiet enough, you might hear your name in it. Thing is, the story of Oolana isn't a ghost tale meant to frighten. It's a mourning, an unhealed wound in the land, weeping for something lost too soon. And if that spirit has turned vengeful, it's only because no one ever listened to her pain. There's an old Yidinji saying, Ngamu wu Nyilgun, Bama Galba Bara. Roughly translated, if you don't hear the land's sorrow, it will speak louder. And now, it speaks through water. They keep records, cold, clinical ones. Coroner reports, death notices, newspaper clippings yellowed by time. 21 names since 1959. But there's a truth the paper never shows, a pattern that ink can't quite capture. It's in the silence left behind, in the empty rooms, the unreturned calls, the birthdays that come and pass without a candle lit. Every name on that list was someone's son, someone's brother. A mate with a laugh that once filled a pub, now gone without a trace, just a ripple in the creek, gone before the splash fades. Most of them were young, fit, adventurous types. That same mold that seems to draw her out, the kind that dives first and asks later, but there's more to it, always is. Some were locals who'd grown up hearing the warnings, others were tourists, wide-eyed, chasing the idea of untouched beauty, of a place not yet tamed by fences and fees. But none of them expected to be the next ghost. One family I spoke to, from Toowoomba, lost their son in the early 90s, 19 years old, athlete, strong as an ox. He wasn't drinking, wasn't showing off, just slipped away. They were upstream, couldn't even see the pool itself, but he wandered down to it on his own, said he needed a moment of quiet, and that was it. Gone. They searched for days, divers in and out of the water, dogs on the banks, but the current kept him hidden. When they finally found him, wedged between two submerged boulders, his limbs twisted unnaturally, his face was peaceful. That's what the mother told me. Peaceful. As though he'd been waiting there, or had been welcomed. It's the sameness of the endings that gnaws at you. Always the same places, same types of victims, same absence of real explanation. It's not like the whole area's cursed, just that pocket. That bend in the creek where the water darkens and the boulders lean close, like eavesdroppers in stone. It's as if that part of the world is stuck in a loop, playing out the sorrow again and again, each death an echo of the first. Locals have tried everything. More signs, fines, education campaigns. They've mapped the currents, surveyed the rock beds, even considered engineering changes. But nothing sticks. Nothing shifts the fact that the deaths don't behave like accidents. They behave like stories repeating themselves. I met an old woman once, lived in the hills above Babinda. She said something I've never forgotten. She said, "That pool's not taking them. It's holding them. Holding pieces of them, like she's building something out of sorrow." At first it sounded like poetic rubbish, but the longer you stare into those waters, the more you understand what she meant. The creek doesn't just kill, it mourns, it cradles, it consumes in a way that feels personal. There's a plaque now, a simple thing, bronze mounted on stone near the edge of the pool. It bears a list of names, dates etched deep, some letters faded from rain and moss. Tourists walk past it every day. Most glance, some stop. Few understand. It's not just a memorial. It's a warning in metal, a roll call of the forgotten. Rain often falls heavy up here. Tropical, sudden. When it does, the creek rises. Fast. That's when the rangers worry most. Not because the current gets wild, but because the sound changes. Louder, like a voice trying to drown out everything else. They say those are the days she's most active, when the grief stirs, when the river remembers. People come here for beauty, but what they find is something raw, something sacred, and sacred doesn't always mean safe. The rainforest is alive, the land breathes, and the pool, well, the pool grieves. Not everyone buys into curses or spirits, fair enough. We live in a world where most answers are expected to come with data and diagrams, not dreamtime and whispers. The authorities, they've got their version of events. Tidy, boxed-up truths with bullet points and procedural language. They'll tell you Devil's Pool is dangerous because of the terrain, that the granite's slick with algae you can't see till your feet are flying. That the current, when it bottlenecks between the boulders, can multiply its pull in seconds flat. They talk about hidden crevices, underwater tunnels that loop back or narrow to the width of a man's shoulders. Claustrophobic, Dark, lethal. Even expert divers have trouble down there, and they're not wrong. Nature doesn't owe us fairness. That place was carved over millennia by forces that don't much care if a sign's been posted or not. There's a particular kind of danger in water like that. Fast, deceptive, without surface disturbance. You step in thinking you're in control. Next thing you know, the water's taken your breath, your balance, your bearings. Emergency services have logged it all. Reports filled with words like misadventure and slippery footing and unknown depth. But when you line up all those reports, name after name, year after year, a question starts to bubble up. Why always there? Why always young men? Why never in the safer pools, just 100 meters upstream? That's where science begins to reach its limits. I remember a geologist once speaking on the radio about it. Sharp bloke, loved the land, but didn't give much weight to old legends. He described the pool's structure like a trap, a series of converging flows over curved granite, creating vortices that function like underwater snares. You can't see them, but they're there, waiting. Sounded logical enough. But then he paused, just for a second, and said, still the death pattern's unusual. Unusual, that's the word you hear again and again. Not impossible, not inexplicable, just off. Like something not quite aligning with what we know of water and stone. Then you speak to the locals, not just the Yidinji, but the non-indigenous folk who've lived near Babinda for decades. They don't roll their eyes at the stories, even the ones who reckon the curse is just myth. They avoid the pool. They tell their kids to keep clear. One bloke, grey-haired with arms like tree trunks, told me, I don't know if it's haunted, but I sure as hell ain't testing it. He told a story about a mate, good bloke, practical, no time for ghost yarns, who went for a dip late one arvo. Just to prove a point, swam into the edge of the washing machine. Only just made it out. Said he felt something hold him under, even though there was nothing around. No rocks, no vines, just water. He came out shaking, said he'd never swim again. The thing is, the more you dig, the more you realize this isn't just about physical danger. It's about the pull of the place. Something about Devil's Pool makes people step closer, look longer, linger where they shouldn't. And once that happens, nature, or something else, takes over. And maybe that's the real story here. Not ghosts or geology, but the simple truth that some places aren't meant for us. Not all beauty is made to be touched. Some of it exists to be respected from a distance. Oolana's story might be wrapped in myth, but the lesson, that's real as dirt. Don't tread where pain lives. Don't turn sacred into spectacle, and always listen when the land says, stay back. Because out here, the land doesn't shout, it warns in whispers. Here's the bit most folk don't talk about loud. The tension, not just in the air or the current, but in belief. A collision of worlds. On one side, the neat, modern certainty of science. On the other, the ancient pulse of spirit and story. Both staring down the same pool, both trying to make sense of the same deaths, but from paths so far apart, they barely see each other. And in between, us, caught in the silence between explanation and meaning. The Yidinji people don't speak of Devil's Pool the way rangers do. For them, it isn't a hazard or a hotspot or a public safety issue. It's a grieving place, a wound. The sight of a love lost so deeply that its echo stitched itself into the land. They don't need scientific instruments to know the danger's real. They've felt it for generations. The pull, the sorrow, the presence of something old and unresolved. To the elders, the story of Oolana isn't a campfire fable. It's lore. A sacred truth passed mouth to mouth, heart to heart, and when another death happens, it doesn't surprise them. It saddens them deeply, but it doesn't confuse. Because to them, these drownings aren't random. They're continuations of a thread never cut. Compare that to the reports filed by search teams, coroners, and safety officials, each death reduced to variables: footwear, water depth, rainfall, a list of environmental factors. And yet, for all that paperwork, no one has found a way to stop it. That's the thing about clashes like this. They're not loud, they're quiet, avoidant. No one wants to offend tradition, but no one wants to surrender certainty either. So the signs go up, the warnings get bolder. But the story of Oolana remains untold in the leaflets, untold in the visitor centers. It lingers only in whispers, in murals, in the subtle curve of carved stone along the trail. I once saw a tour group standing on the lookout platform above the pool. Half were taking selfies, laughing, pointing at the water below. The other half, they just stood, quiet, a bit pale. One woman, mid-40s, looked like a teacher or librarian, just stared. I caught her eye as she turned to leave. She didn't say a word, but I'll never forget the look. Like she'd heard something the others hadn't. That's the split. Some hear nothing, others feel everything. The elders, when they still held full ceremonies, would speak directly to the water, not with demands, but with respect, asking the spirit of Oolana to rest, to forgive, to let go. But how do you ask a heart broken in time to stop mourning? Because in truth, maybe Oolana's not angry. Maybe she's just lost, reaching. Like a lantern in fog, drawing shapes that remind her of something once held and now gone. And in doing so, catching souls not meant for her. That's what one elder told me anyway, that it's not vengeance, it's confusion. And if that's true, then each death isn't an act of malice, but of misrecognition. It's a bitter thing to accept, that a spirit so full of love could become something feared. But that's grief, isn't it? Left long enough, it changes, turns sharp, turns inward, turns deadly. So the question lingers. Do we keep trying to fence off the pool, map its dangers, measure its flow? Or do we learn to listen, not to ghosts, but to memory, to pain in the land, to the stories that have outlived us all? 'Cause the real danger, it might not be the current. It might be forgetting what came before we ever laid eyes on that water. There's a kind of hush that settles over Devil's Pool come dusk. Not the peaceful quiet you get when the bush nods off for the night, but a different quiet, taut, expectant, the kind that makes you check over your shoulder even when you know no one's there. It's then, in those fading hours, that the place feels most alive, or perhaps most awake. And still, people come. They keep arriving, some drawn by the legend, others by the beauty, and many unaware of either. They snap their photos, laugh in the sun, dip their feet in the shallows. And for the most part, they're fine. The danger isn't everywhere. It's focused, specific, down where the rocks narrow and the water deepens and the names fade into stone. But that doesn't mean the warning's any less real. The locals, they've learned to live with it. The rangers patrol, elders watch with tired eyes. Some still speak to the land when no one's listening. Quiet offerings, soft words, respect, not ritual. The ceremonies may be fewer now, but the reverence remains. Because the land demands it, there's a reverence that must be shown in places like this, not because of superstition, but because of truth. Not the truth of data and graphs, but the older one. The one that settles in the bones. That tells you this land has stories older than names, and rules older than laws. And Devil's Pool? That's sacred ground. Not in the polished way of temples and spires, but in the raw, heavy way that sits behind your ribs when the bush goes silent. Sacred because something happened here. Sacred because something remains. I've seen travelers stop mid-step as they near the boulders. Not because of signs, not because of tales, but because something in them knew, like a string pulled tight behind the heart. That's what the elders say, that if you're listening, the land will speak. And when it says enough, you'd best heed it. These days, the signs are clearer. The warnings posted in big red letters, multilingual even. Memorials placed with care, crosses, flowers, names. They dot the path like whispers, little reminders that grief doesn't fade, it embeds. But still, the pull remains. The legend of Oolana has shifted over time, from spoken tale to tourist footnote. But it survives. In shadows, in murals, in the eyes of those who know. Her story isn't just about sorrow. It's a tether, a reminder that the land sees us and remembers what we do. Some reckon the pool is calming now. That with more awareness, fewer lives will be taken. That the spirit may rest soon. Others aren't so sure. They say she's not done, that her weeping's grown quieter, yes, but not gone. That grief like hers doesn't end. It waits. It watches. Because that's the thing about pain carved into earth. It doesn't fade like footprints. It settles in the bedrock, in the way wind bends branches, in the pause before the plunge. And the pool, beautiful, deadly, sacred, is the echo. And so we come to the edge, not just of the tale, but of the place itself. The point where gravel ends and stone begins, where water glistens like glass yet moves like thought. You stand there, peering down into that hollow in the rocks, and you feel it. Not fear exactly, but weight. The weight of memory, of tragedy, of something too old to name. Devil's Pool doesn't scream its warning, it whispers it through moss-draped trunks. Through signs sun-faded and rain-bitten, through the hush of a tourist gone quiet mid-photo. It doesn't demand reverence. It assumes it. The same way fire assumes caution, or the sea commands respect. It's not here to teach you a lesson. It is the lesson. And the legend of Oolana, that's not just an outback yarn to keep thrill-seekers at bay. It's a heartbeat stitched into the rainforest, pulsing with every ripple, every storm. Her story is tangled in the roots of those ancient trees, wound tight around the boulders like vines. It doesn't need your belief to exist. It's simply there, waiting, watching. Whether you believe Oolana's spirit truly lingers or not, well, that's up to you. Maybe she's real, maybe grief, when left unanswered long enough, turns to something more. Maybe some sorrow echoes so deeply it changes the air around it. Or maybe it's all just water and stone, shaped by time and tragedy, no spirit required. But either way, people die here, and their stories now ripple alongside hers. The pool has taken many, but it's given something back too. A warning, a reminder that not all beauty is for touching, that not every paradise wants visitors, that some places, like old wounds, should be approached with care and listening. So if you ever find yourself in far north Queensland, wandering through the rainforest, with the sun dripping through the leaves and the cicadas calling, and you come upon Babinda Boulders, stop, breathe, feel, read the names etched in stone, listen to the silence. You might not see her, but you'll know she's there. And in that moment, maybe, just maybe, you'll understand. Because some truths out here aren't spoken in words. They're carried on the breeze, etched in the bark, reflected in still water, and some secrets, they run deeper than any river. That's the story, mate. Take it how you will. Just remember, the land's always watching. And some places out here in the outback, they never forget.